guys, welcome back. It's Emily with Telltale. So today I am going to be doing a little bit of a different review. I'm going to do a design review because I actually have not finished reading this book, and you'll probably see why in a minute. It is a little difficult for me to try and retrain my brain to process and read through the format of this book, but this is an interesting book. Design-wise. I've had this one for a few years now, and it sounds like an interesting story. It's about a gentleman who drops out of grad school and goes back to New Jersey, and he goes back working for a boatyard. His friends and he are trying to make music. So he just kind of like, it's this, non-traditional story where, he had hopes and dreams, didn't finish his dissertation, and just decided his real passion was music. So he kind of goes home, things have changed, there's some drama with corrupt cops that are involved, and he's, don't mind Shelby, she's just sleeping over here, my old girl. So he comes home kind of, washed up from and burned out on school. So it sounds like a really interesting story. I haven't finished it yet, but here is the book in question. This is Sound by T.M. Wolfe. It was his first novel. I haven't read any of his other work yet, but this is such an interesting, what attracted me first was the book cover. Like, this thing looks like an album. It's kind of cool. Like, you've got some really interesting Photoshop mirroring here. You've got, like, this detail of this vintage boat thing, kind of speaking to the story, having a boatyard. Of course, you've got the water here. Really interesting shape. So this is not a typical size for a novel. This is actually more of a size for I guess a coffee table book would be more shaped like this. It's almost square. It's quite large. It's not an easy book to carry around and throw in your purse, but a lot of the design decisions of this book are really, really interesting, and I would love to know more of the rationale behind it. So this is your front cover. This is your spine, which is also kind of intriguing, the way they set up the title in there. And of course, you've got your back cover with all the required synopsis and things like that. So that's pretty standard. So one of the things that intrigued me, not just about this book, was the size and the cover, but the interior. Because this book is about music, it is laid out like a digital music program. So all of your dialogue is stacked and layered, kind of similarly to, if any of you have ever used even like Photoshop. Photoshop has layering. If you've ever used, especially its timelines for videos, Premiere does something similar where you kind of have to layer things and piece them apart and do weird stuff with it. So this is actually why it's been a little more difficult for me to get through this book, because the way the dialogue is formatted is in this layering style, as if it's running through a program, a music program. It's really, really interesting. So here's a couple pages of dialogue. As you can see, your dialogue starts here on this layer, and then you kind of have to train your brain to go, this is the next thing to read, then this one, and then you kind of have to jump around the page a little bit more, which has it's been interesting to try to retrain my brain to do this. So yeah, and then on top of that, all the individuals in this book, their dialogue is represented by a different font. As a designer, that's something I don't usually recommend people doing, because when you start mixing fonts that much, it starts getting really confusing. It's a little jarring for the eyes. I think it is a clever and kind of fun thing to do, It definitely is hard as a reader to adjust to it. It's it's not a design decision I would have made, but it is definitely an interesting design decision. Um, Even like the quotation marks. Like, look at this. The quotation marks, they're light, but have their own layer. Like, there's just some really interesting design decisions done in here. I really like the way they did the page numbering, though. Like, the page numbering's really cool. Like, they just put it all the way across the bottom, kind of light, so it's a little different. And this is how they do each chapter. They kind of start it like this. So the background is this is chapter 3, and then they have a title. Kind of like the use of that typeface for the title. For those of you who know me, I love black letter type, and it's just stunning, old style. It could be used for so many things. So it's I am very partial to that. I think it's interesting how they kind of juxtapose the black letter type with like this graffiti style type behind it. I think that's really, really interesting. And of course, when there's like background, it's like reading a normal story. So you have your regular reading typeface here when they're just kind of world building or kind of giving you the scenario. And it's only the dialogue that is in this format of layering. So interesting. So some of these design things they decided to do are just really, really unusual. And then of course, side B. So they kind of go through the different sections of the book as if it's a album. So I definitely can see what they were doing, especially making this look like a record album, and then having the side B for the record album. I think that was very, very clever of them. And then on top of that, having all the dialogue done as a design program, harder to read, but definitely really involves you in the process of making music, which I thought was really, really fascinating and really immerses, I think, the reader. Of course, the things that I don't like are having way too many typefaces. That is just too many fonts and in too many places, even though it pulls the individual in. And it kind of, when you start reading it, you recognize that the fonts really represent the character well. Like, you can almost come up with the tone of voice based off of these typefaces, especially if you're a designer. Like, I've made up the tone of voice that these individuals have because of these fonts. However, for the average reader who doesn't understand why this book was built the way it is really, really complicated to read. You start questioning why you even tried. I can definitely see this as a fun book for designers to have and to try to read, and just as an experience of learning a different way and method of reading a story, especially the dialogue. But I do not recommend this for people who have a hard time with reading, anybody who has dyslexia, anybody who has a learning difference of any kind, who have visual learning disabilities of any kind. It is a very complex book to try to get through. I actually have a visual learning disability, so it has been very difficult for me to read through this book. However, design-wise, it was so intriguing that I still want to try. So yeah, really interesting design decisions in this book. All very relevant to the storyline, though not very relevant to how the common person reads. So this is more of an art book / novel, I think, than it actually is a novel. And honestly, one of the things that I have a really hard time with is because of the way they layered all the copy, this is not a very long story when you think about it. This is, this book is how many pages? Like almost 400 pages. Honestly, if this was written in a normal novel style with traditional dialogue and stuff, it would probably be half this size. It would probably only be about a 200-page novel, which isn't a bad thing. So I feel like it would be a really quick read, but because of having to retrain your brain It does take a little bit longer. It, of course, is less economical because you have to make it more pages just the way you're formatting the book. So it's really, I don't know that all of the design decisions made sense economically based off of budget, but for the story, for the immersive experience, and for the design, they make sense. So as designers, we're kind of taught to balance the two. This one, I don't feel like balanced anything. I think they, in a way, sacrificed legibility on the altar of cool, which is something in my training I was taught never to do. Literally, we had like my design teacher said never sacrifice legibility on the altar of cool. So I feel like this sort of did that to a degree. It's not like anything super unclear, like you can't read it at all, but it definitely produces a lot of obstructions and difficulties. So still a really interesting read. If you're a designer, I definitely want you to check out this book. Really look it over. Give it a really good read through if you can. Even a skim through is interesting. But I own this book for posterity. Like, I'm really trying to read through it, but I definitely own this book just because it is such an interesting book design-wise. So yeah, let me know if you have ever read a book that is, picked up a book, one, by its cover, by its design. Let me know if there are any other books that we can look at that have really interesting design choices in them. I love looking at this kind of thing. I'm definitely going to try and keep reading through this guy and see if I can finish the story, because it seems really compelling. The more I read it, I'm only into chapter 3 right now, but it's a really quick, good read, I feel, if you can quickly adapt to the style. I do have to take a lot of breaks personally to get through it, so but yeah, the storyline seems really intriguing, so I'm gonna keep pushing through it. Design is really interesting. Yeah, so comment, let me know what your thoughts are, if you've read it, if you like it, if the format was hard for you, let us know, or if it was easy for you. If you have any more information too about music building or any of the design decisions made in this book, definitely feel free to comment and let me know if there are any unusual books that you've seen design-wise that you would like us to review or think we should look at. So thanks guys for joining me. You have a great rest of your day.